Dear friends, it's hearty and warm welcome as usual once again in this new lecture. Friends, all of you are known. In our previous lecture, we have started the study of this topic, that is mechanism of respiration. And I have already told you that the entire mechanism of respiration include four major events such as breathing, means inspiration and expiration, inhalation of fresh air and outletting of foul air. Second step include external respiration, third internal respiration, and fourth cellular respiration, of which already we have completed the study of first two steps in our previous lecture, that is breathing and external respiration. So now today let us talk about third step, that is internal respiration, and fourth step cellular respiration. So quickly let us move to the third step, that is internal respiration. Internal respiration also include two major steps such as the transportation of gases and second exchange of gases at the tissue level. I said that the internal respiration, it also include two major events such as the transportation of gases and second, that is the exchange of gases at the tissue level. So let us talk first of all transport of gases. We know that the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the body of human being is carried out with the help of circulating fluid, that is blood. Blood, it carries the oxygen from lungs, that is respiratory surface, up to each and every tissue cells, and carbon dioxide from tissue cells up to the lungs. First of all, let us talk about the transportation of oxygen. Let us talk about the transport of oxygen. The transportation of oxygen by blood is carried out by two different ways. We can say the oxygen is transported by blood in two different forms. Oxygen is transported by blood in two different forms, such as in the form of solution and in the form of Oxy Hemoglobin. रक्तामार्फत ऑक्सिजनची वाहतूक ही केली जाते, मात्र ऑक्सिजन हा दोन वेगवेगळ्या स्वरूपात ट्रान्सपोर्ट केला जातो. फर्स्ट इन द फॉर्म ऑफ सोल्यूशन and second in the form of Oxy Hemoglobin. Let us talk. Being slightly soluble in water, just 3% of the oxygen is transported as its solution in the blood plasma. All of you might be known that the blood has two major components. Its fluid part, liquid part is called plasma. रक्ताचे दोन प्रमुख घटक आहेत, त्याचा जो फ्लुइड पार्ट आहे, द्रवरूप भाग आहे, त्याला प्लाझ्मा असं म्हणतात, की ज्यात जवळपास 92% ऑफ वॉटर इज प्रेझेंट. आणि इन दॅट प्लाझ्मा 3 different types of blood corpuscles are present, namely RBCs, WBCs and platelets. So I said that the oxygen being slightly soluble in water, just 3% of oxygen is transported as its solution in the plasma. म्हणजे 3% ऑक्सिजन फक्त प्लाझ्मा मध्ये डिफ्यूज होतो, डिसॉल्व होतो आणि सोल्युशनच्या स्वरूपात हा ऑक्सिजन ट्रान्सपोर्ट केला जातो, बट इट इज सिम्पली 3%. while the major form of transportation of oxygen is oxyhemoglobin. Let us talk about it. You know that hemoglobin is red colored iron containing respiratory pigment present in the RBCs. It is red colored and iron containing respiratory pigment. It is present in the RBCs. The oxygen, about 97% of oxygen, it binds with the hemoglobin to form Oxy Hemoglobin. Listen, I told you initially 3% of the oxygen is carried out as its solution, while about 97% of the oxygen it binds with the hemoglobin to form Oxy Hemoglobin. Oxy Hemoglobin. Let me write here. When this Oxy Hemoglobin along with blood is carried up to the tissue cells, it undergoes dissociation so that the oxygen becomes free and it is given, or we can say it is supplied to the tissue cells. Now the hemoglobin has ferrous ions. Single hemoglobin molecule has 4 Fe2 plus ions, that is ferrous ions, and each of one can bind with one molecule of oxygen. Hemoglobin has 4 ferrous ions Fe2 plus, and each of one can bind to single molecule of oxygen, and therefore a single hemoglobin molecule can carry 1 to 4 oxygen molecule. अर्थात एका हेमोग्लोबिन मध्ये 4 फेरस आयन्स असतात आणि प्रत्येक फेरस आयन हा एका ऑक्सिजनच्या मॉलिक्यूलला बाइंड होऊ शकतो आणि म्हणून एक हिमोग्लोबिनचा मॉलिक्यूल 1 ते 4 ऑक्सिजनच्या मॉलिक्यूल्सला बाइंड आणि कॅरी करू शकतो. बट इट डिपेंड्स अपॉन द ऑक्सिजन सॅच्युरेशन ऑफ हिमोग्लोबिन. It depends upon the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. याचा अर्थ त्या ठिकाणी हिमोग्लोबिनचं ऑक्सिजन सॅच्युरेशन किती झालंय याच्या आधारावर ते डिपेंड असतं. and the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin is depend upon the oxygen tension. Oxygen tension, that is nothing but the PO2, partial pressure of oxygen. म्हणजे ऑक्सिजन हिमोग्लोबिन सॅच्युरेशन हे ऑक्सिजन टेन्शन किंवा पार्शियल प्रेशर ऑफ ऑक्सिजन यावर अवलंबून असतं. ऍक्च्युअली द 100% ऑक्सिजन सॅच्युरेशन ऑफ हिमोग्लोबिन इज नॉट पॉसिबल or it is very rare. At 100 mmHg partial pressure of oxygen, जरी 100 mmHg एवढं ऑक्सिजनचं पार्शियल प्रेशर असलं तरी सुद्धा 100% of oxygen saturation of hemoglobin is very rarely seen. Near about 95 to 97% of oxygen saturation is commonly seen in normal and healthy person. And whenever it falls down the oxygen tension, it falls down the partial pressure of oxygen, it affects, it deteriorates, it reduces the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin. ज्या वेळेला पार्शियल प्रेशर ऑफ ऑक्सिजन हे कमी होतं त्यावेळेला अर्थातच ऑक्सिजन सॅच्युरेशन ऑफ हिमोग्लोबिन हे सुद्धा कमी होतं. इट इज फाउंड दॅट whenever there is only 30 mmHg partial pressure of oxygen, at that time the hemoglobin oxygen saturation falls to near about 50%. म्हणजे जर त्या ठिकाणी ऑक्सिजनचं पार्शियल प्रेशर आहे 30 mmHg इथपर्यंत असेल, इतकं कमी असेल, तर हिमोग्लोबिन ऑक्सिजन सॅच्युरेशन हे जवळपास निम्मच दिसतं. सो आय सेड दॅट द hemoglobin oxygen saturation is depend upon the partial pressure of oxygen, and the relationship between oxygen hemoglobin saturation and partial pressure of O2 is depicted with the help of one curve, with the help of one graph known as oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Let us talk about that oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Let me draw here a diagram representing that oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Here I am going to show the x and y axis. Along the x axis, consider PO2, that is partial pressure of oxygen or oxygen tension, and along the y axis the oxygen hemoglobin saturation in percent, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Now this oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve normally appears as sigmoid curve, S-shaped curve, in this manner. Now this sigmoid curve, this oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is affected by so many different factors, such as hydrogen ion concentration, PCO2, that is partial pressure of carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide tension, third temperature, and fourth the concentration of 2,3-di-PGA in RBCs. 2,3-di-PGA, 2,3-diphosphoglycerate, 2,3-diphosphoglyceric acid. Now these factors if get increased, जर या चार फॅक्टर पैकी एक किंवा अधिक फॅक्टर जर वाढले रक्तामधले, तर it definitely affects the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, and that oxygen dissociation curve shows rightward shifting. It shows slightly rightward shifting. Ka? Because whenever these factors get increased, either single or more, then the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation increases. Okay, oxygen hemoglobin dissociation increases, and therefore this curve gets shifted slightly towards the right side. Let me tell you, there are two effects such as Bohr effect and HALDANE effect, which definitely proved helpful for the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide. First of all, let me tell you about the Bohr effect. Bohr's effect. Bohr's effect represents the carbon dioxide dissolves into the water to form carbonic acid. CO2, when reacts with water, there is a formation of carbonic acid. This carbonic acid in the tissue cells definitely decreases the pH. It means pH of tissue cell, it falls down, it reduces, it becomes acidic, and it induces oxyhemoglobin. It induces oxyhemoglobin to give up more and more oxygen. It means the acidic nature of tissue cells, it induces oxyhemoglobin to give up oxygen more and more. This is called as the BOHR'S effect. And these Bohr effects play important role in the transportation of O2. While another effect, that is HALDANE effect. HALDANE effect represents the binding of hemoglobin with oxygen, that is the formation of oxyhemoglobin. It facilitates to displace CO2 from blood. Try to understand. Here the HALDANE effect describes that the binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin and formation of oxyhemoglobin, it displaces the carbon dioxide from the blood. It means this HALDANE effect, it plays very important role in the transportation of CO2, and Bohr effect, it plays very important role in the transportation of oxygen. So here we have discussed about the transportation of oxygen. Now let us talk about the transportation of carbon dioxide. Let us see. Transport of CO2. The carbon dioxide is also transported in three different forms, such as in the form of physical solution, then in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, and third in the form of bicarbonates. Let me teach you one by one each. First, in the form of physical solution, the carbon dioxide is also slightly soluble in water, and therefore about 7% of carbon dioxide is transported as its solution. It means the carbon dioxide reacts with water to form carbonic acid, that is H2CO3. This H2CO3 is quite unstable compound, therefore at low carbon dioxide tension, at low partial pressure of carbon dioxide, this carbonic acid undergoes dissociation to form again CO2 and water. So first of all, I have to tell you that the transportation of carbon dioxide, near about 7% of transport of carbon dioxide is carried out as its solution in the form of carbonic acid. Second form, that is in the form of bicarbonates. The carbon dioxide, just as I told you, it reacts with water to form carbonic acid, but the carbon dioxide first of all enters from plasma into the RBC, red blood cells. सुरुवातीला प्लाझ्मामध्ये असलेला कार्बन डायऑक्साइड, प्लाझ्मामध्ये डिफ्यूज झालेला कार्बन डायऑक्साइड हा आरबीसी मध्ये आधी डिफ्यूज होतो. यू नो आरबीसी, दॅट इज रेड ब्लड सेल्स. ओके, अँड हियर इन द आरबीसी, in presence of enzyme carbonic anhydrase, there is a formation of H2CO3, that is carbonic acid. या ठिकाणी आरबीसी मध्ये कार्बन डायऑक्साइड आणि पाणी या दोघांपासून H2CO3 म्हणजे कार्बोनिक ऍसिड तयार होतं, and for that purpose here is one enzyme, zinc containing enzyme, namely carbonic anhydrase. This enzyme is present in RBC in very large quantity, while it is absent or it is in very less quantity in plasma, and that's why within RBC there is a maximum formation of carbonic acid. हे जे एन्झाइम आहे ते आरबीसी मध्ये खूप जास्त प्रमाणात असल्यामुळे आरबीसी मध्ये कार्बोनिक ऍसिड मोठ्या प्रमाणात तयार होतं. I told you just now that this carbonic acid is unstable and therefore it dissociates to form H plus and HCO3 minus ions, that is hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. Due to the continuous accumulation of these bicarbonate ion, these ions they diffuses out of the RBC. Consider here is the RBC, and therefore these bicarbonate ions, it is a cation, it diffuses out of the RBC, and here it combines with either sodium or potassium to form sodium bicarbonate or potassium bicarbonate. Now the exit of bicarbonate ions, that is anion, negatively charged ions are called anions. So exit of these bicarbonate ion from RBC into the plasma may cause the imbalancing of ions into the RBC, and therefore there is a shifting of chloride ions into the RBC to balance the ions for the maintenance of ionic balance, and this phenomenon is known as chloride shift or Hamburger's effect. Chloride shift or Hamburger's effect. So in this manner we have studied the second way of carbon dioxide transportation, and third way is transportation of oxygen in the form of hemoglobin. One more thing, the dissociation of carbonic acid into the RBC forms H plus and HCO3 minus ions. Okay, HCO3 minus ions get shifted to the outside, it comes out of the RBC. Okay, but this accumulation of hydrogen ion might be expected to lower down the pH. Okay, and therefore this hydrogen ion combines with hemoglobin to form HHB. It is called as the deoxyhemoglobin, or it is known as the reduced hemoglobin. Deoxyhemoglobin or reduced hemoglobin means as the hemoglobin it binds with the hydrogen ion, it nullifies the effect of hydrogen, and therefore there is no chance of fall in the pH of blood. पर्यायाने त्या ठिकाणी रक्ताचा pH कमी होणार नाही, आणि म्हणून आपण असं म्हणू शकतो की this hemoglobin it acts as the buffer. Buffer means the material which prevents the sudden drastic change in the pH. Anyway, third way of transportation, that is the carbaminohemoglobin. Carbaminohemoglobin. I told you that about 7% of the carbon dioxide is transported as its physical solution. 70% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonates, and just 23% of carbon dioxide is transported in the form of carbaminohemoglobin. It means the carbon dioxide it binds with the hemoglobin to form HbCO2. that is carbaminohemoglobin, and this carbaminohemoglobin again undergoes dissociation at the level of alveoli near the lungs, where the carbon dioxide tension is less, where partial pressure of carbon dioxide is less. लंग्सच्या लेवलला, अल्व्हेओलार लेवलला कार्बन डायऑक्साइडचं पार्शियल प्रेशर कमी आहे आणि त्या ठिकाणी हा कार्बॅमिनो हिमोग्लोबिन डिसोसिएट होतो, हिमोग्लोबिन पासून कार्बन डायऑक्साइड वेगळा होतो, and that carbon dioxide is exhaled out in the form of foul air. In this manner we have studied about the transport of carbon dioxide. Now come to the second major event of internal respiration, that is exchange of gases at the tissue level. Second event during internal respiration, that is exchange of gases at the tissue level. At tissue level, the exchange of gases takes place between the tissue capillary blood and tissue cells. Let me explain it. I said that at the tissue level, the exchange of gases takes place between the tissue blood capillaries and the tissue cells. Actually, this exchange of gases takes place via tissue fluid. Tissue fluid may be known as the interstitial fluid. Let me explain you. Consider here is supposed to be the tissue cells. Here I am going to show the interstitial fluid, which may be simply called as the tissue fluid, which baths each and every cell. So here is the interstitial fluid. Consider here is the blood capillaries. You know that blood capillaries are thinnest and finest branch of artery. These tissue capillaries brings the oxygenated blood at the tissue. So this oxygenated blood has definitely more oxygen tension and less carbon dioxide tension. Whatever blood is brought by these blood capillaries contain more oxygen concentration, more oxygen tension and less carbon dioxide tension. Therefore, the oxygen from this capillary blood, it diffuses into the interstitial fluid. Blood capillary मधून oxygen हा interstitial fluid मध्ये diffuse होतो, and from interstitial fluid the oxygen it enters into actually the tissue cells. In the same manner, in the tissue cells, as carbon dioxide tension is more than oxygen tension, and therefore the carbon dioxide from tissue cells diffuses out into the interstitial fluid, and from interstitial fluid that carbon dioxide enters into the blood capillaries. In this manner, at the level of tissue cells, it occurs the exchange of O2 and CO2 between the capillary blood and the tissue cells. That's all about the third step in the mechanism of respiration, that is internal respiration. Now finally, let us talk about the last step, that is cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, it involves the actual oxidation of glucose and release of energy. So the fourth major step in the mechanism of respiration, that is cellular respiration. Cellular respiration, as I said just now, it involves the stepwise breaking down, stepwise oxidation of organic substrate, that is glucose, leading to the release of energy. We can represent it as C6H12O6 plus 6O2 gives 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus 686 kilocalories of energy. We have already studied in our 11th class that the aerobic respiration, it involves the stepwise oxidation of glucose by the process of glycolysis, acetylation, Krebs cycle, and finally the terminal oxidation. During aerobic respiration, so the glucose is completely oxidized to release the large amount of energy, that is 686 kilocalories. Oxidation of 1 mole of glucose produces such a large amount of energy, and of which some of the energy is stored in the form of ATP. We know the ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and inorganic phosphate togetherly form ATP, adenosine triphosphate, in which some of that energy is temporarily stored, and therefore actually the energy currency, biological usable form of energy, is generated at the end of this entire mechanism of respiration. So here ends the topic, mechanism of respiration. Let us stop here. Thank you and bye.